Alright guys, we're going to do a pretty cool tutorial here. It's something that we're seeing more and more and more on the internet nowadays, and it's scrolling when you get to a certain position. Meaning you can kind of scroll forever. So Facebook uses this, the jQuery comments use this, basically anything that uses Disqus as comments, like Engadget, they all use this as well. And what it basically does is it waits until you're at a certain point of scrolling before it loads more content, which is great for speeding up page time, meaning you only load a little bit, not all these comments, all those database calls, wait until you actually need to see it. So here's an example. If I click on height, at the moment, look, take note of the side of the scroll bar. No comments have loaded because I haven't started scrolling and I haven't gone anywhere. As I scroll down, once I get to the bottom here, you'll see all the comments loading, and there we go. Now the scroll bar is smaller and it's loaded 14 comments. They were not there before. It actually waited till I scrolled to a certain point to do that. So let's make that. Here's an example that I've made. Here you can see that we've got a bunch of stuff loaded in from Flickr here. We're going to use the public Flickr API in order to load this information. And as I scroll, I've got a MX Revolution mouse with the wheel that can kind of spin it forever. So I'm just going to spin it really fast, and you'll get to see how the scroll bar will get smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's going to load more and more content. So you can see how it's just loading more and more and more, and you can see a little loading dialog as well. So it's just continuously loading forever, which is why I call this forever scroll. But it's basically what it does, the way I have this working, is it waits till it gets to the very bottom, and then it will load more content. And there you go. So let's look at how this is going to happen. So if we refresh, it's gone because I've deleted the code. So let's start. We have to start with some intro stuff here as usual. Close our head, open a body, and close the body. Close the HTML. The only HTML we need is that one main div. So that's going to be called div id equals Flickr. Okay? That's our main div. Now we need to style it. So we're going to style, we're basically going to just, let me paste this in here. The style is pretty simple. We're going to have a 800 by 600 box, which is going to be scrolling vertically. And we're going to basically set those results, those mini boxes of results, some padding, border, background, color, margin, and some font stuff. And then we're going to specifically style the loading one to have a different background and a different font color. Okay? So now we need to load some jQuery. So let's actually do the part where we need to load from Flickr. So we need to do some script type equals quote text slash JavaScript slash script function. So we're going to use Flickr's JSON-P URL. We're going to use the getJSON method. So first let's store what the URL is for JSON-P. That's what it is for Flickr. So let's actually do the jQuery method. So it's going to be .getJSON to that URL, passing it a function with that data. Okay, and let's console.log that data to see, we basically need to get to that array of all the different photos that's in this API. So let's save and refresh, and let's view developer tools, and $ is not defined, and that's because I didn't include jQuery. So let's grab the jQuery source and put that right here and refresh. Okay, so here's our object. So this is data. Data dot, okay, so photo set is the object that's next, and then in photo set you see here photo is array 38. So photo is our array of all of our Flickr photos. Okay, and inside of those you can see there they all are. So we will then say var photos equals data dot photo set dot photo. Okay, that's the array. So now we're going to loop through that array of photos and pull out the title. So $.each photos, okay, and that's going to be a function which takes I being the increment and then photo, which is each individual photo, okay. And now we need to know the title of each, which is, if we go into one of these objects, we can see that it's going to be photo.title, and that's going to be this guy right here. So photo.title. So we're going to say var title equals photo.title. Okay, that's how we do that. So now we need to append a new div to our main div, our main Flickr div. So we're just going to say pound Flickr.append, and we're going to create a new div here. Okay, like this. Oops. Okay, and we need to give our div a class of Flickr results so that it matches our CSS up here. And inside the div, we would need to escape out of our quotes and add plus signs so we can add that title in there. So that's going to create a div of class Flickr results that has each title in there. Okay, so if we save that, oops, and refresh, cannot read property photo of undefined. So it says that photo set is undefined, and that's because I wrote font set. So let's type that correctly and refresh. There we go. So here is all of those photos loaded. Okay. Now, obviously, it's not doing the forever scroll part because we haven't done that yet. So now, let's do that part. Before we can actually do that part, though, we have to know that we're going to be doing this API call many, many times. And when you do something many, many times, it means you needed to make it a function. So we're going to take this out of here, out of our onReady, and make it into its own function. So function load Flickr, and that does our stuff. And now in our onReady, we need to load initial photos. And to do that, we just call our function now, load Flickr, and we should get the same results. And we do. So now let's outline the steps that we need to take to do the rest of this. So first, we're going to load Flickr, right? We just did that. So now we're going to basically attach. Well, we basically need to attach the scroll event of the main div. Okay. So inside of that, we're going to have to get the max and current scroll position, because the math behind this is going to be when our current scroll position is equal to the maximum scroll position. That means you're at the bottom. Okay? So we're going to get these as variables, and then we're going to say, are we at the bottom? Question mark. And then once we are at the bottom, we're going to say we're going to add the loading box, because we're going to signify that we've begun loading. And then we're going to scroll to the bottom of the page, scroll to the bottom of the div, and then we're going to load more. Load more photos. Okay, so that's the process. So now we need to attach the scroll event. So pound Flickr dot scroll function, like that. Okay. Now we need to get the max and current scroll. So var max scroll. The max scroll in this case is equal to the DOM element. So here's the jQuery element. Now we have the DOM element dot scroll top. Okay, that's the maximum scroll. Now curr scroll, which we're calling current scroll, which we're calling curr scroll, is equal to the DOM element, like that, same as before, except this time it's scroll height. Now we actually have to account this time for the actual height of the element, and I can't explain this too much more, but trust me, after doing it a while and figuring it out, it's right to do minus this, the jQuery element, that height. This will correctly get you your current scroll position. Okay, so now we have to say, are we at the bottom? So to ask that question, we have to say if curr scroll is equal to max scroll. And that asks the question, are we at the bottom? So then we have to add the loading box by saying pound Flickr dot append, and then what we're appending is a div, and we need to give the div the class loading, and we have to give it a message and just say loading dot dot dot. Okay. Then we need to scroll to the bottom of the div. To scroll to the bottom of an element, you basically do we basically have to do the set the scroll top equal to this guy. So we're literally just going to say this dot scroll top equals this dot scroll height minus height, that guy. So that will scroll to the bottom. Now we're going to load more photos. To do that, we call load Flickr again. Again, That's why we made it a function, so that we didn't have to write this part twice. Okay? So we have a good set of functionality here, but we're missing a couple things, and that's handling the loading. If you have a mouse like mine and you're scrolling a really long time, you're going to be hitting this condition many times per second, and that's bad. You really only want it to happen, and then once you're loading, you don't want it to happen anymore. So we actually need a variable that tracks whether we're currently loading or not. So when we first start our document, in the very beginning, we're going to say var loading equals true, because at the very beginning, we are loading, right? So then, once we've loaded in here, so outside of here, actually, not outside of there, in the get.json, outside of the each. So once we've loaded, we want to kill the loading stuff. And what that means is we're going to set that loading variable equal to false now, meaning after this is completed, we're no longer loading. And we have to get rid of the div that we created down here. So we're just going to say find anything that has the class loading and remove it. Okay? So this is, we're starting off and saying I'm starting off loading. As soon as I'm done loading, say I'm done loading. And what that also means now is that in here, when you start scrolling, set loading. So as soon as I start scrolling, I need to say that I'm about to load. So loading equals true. Okay, so when I start scrolling, I am now loading. And then we need our if condition to actually check for that variable. So let's just put this in parentheses, because this is its own little condition. So if you're at the bottom and loading equals false, meaning you're not currently loading. So the first time you hit this, it sets it to true, and then only, so this will get called a million times a second, but it won't execute because of this until it's done loading, and it will set loading to false. Got it? And that's it. Save and refresh. And now once I scroll and hit the bottom, nothing happens. Let's see why. Developer, tools, invalid left-hand side assignment for line 21. I'm sorry, for line 59. 59. And that's because you can't have a single equal sign when you test for equality. You need a double equal sign. Save and refresh. No errors. So when I scroll and hit the bottom, you see the loading box, and it goes away when it needs to, and it continues scrolling forever. So this is how you would load more content as you scroll, and how you would show a loading box to show that you're actually loading more content. So I have a minute here, so some people may be asking, well, what if I want to scroll when I'm not all the way at the bottom? How do I do that? Because my script right now takes you have to be at the bottom. Well, that's a pretty simple modification. Also, to note that I actually mixed these two up. My apologies. It's your current scroll is scroll top, and your max scroll is this height minus height. That guy. So knowing that, you would say instead of equal to, you would say if you're currently greater than or equal to max scroll minus, say, 400. Okay, so I'm 400 pixels before the maximum. Save that and refresh, and now when I scroll and I get to about 400 away, then it will do it. Okay, and you see how it kind of grabbed me at 400 pixels and then loaded more. Like that. Boom, loaded more, loaded more, loaded more, loaded more. Okay, so there you go. So that's how you would adjust it if you didn't want to be straight at the bottom.